devastated by war, dependent on foreign aid just to feed its people. A nation with a GDP of only $4 billion on par with some of the poorest countries in Africa at the time. Lacking resources, crippled by outdated infrastructure, trapped between global powers. And yet, within just 2 decades, this nation's economy grew 25 times larger. 3 decades later, it would stand among the world's leading economies. What helped this country rise from the ashes? Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Wolf, and this is Timeless Tales. Today, we'll uncover how South Korea turned its war-torn ruins into a global powerhouse. After World War II, when Japan surrendered, the Korean peninsula was liberated but quickly torn apart by 3 conflicting ideologies: nationalism, Soviet-style communism, and American capitalism. Tensions exploded on June 25, 1950, when North Korea invaded the South. Backed by the Soviet Union and countered by American intervention, the Korean War left 20% of the population dead or wounded. The economy collapsed. The United States poured in $2.3 billion in aid, but under President Syngman Rhee, South Korea remained poor, corrupt, and dominated by landlords and elites. Farmers were overtaxed, GDP stagnated, and bribery spread like wildfire. Major companies like Samsung, founded 1938, and Lucky Gold Star, later LG, founded 1947, still existed, but mostly served local markets. Rhee's authoritarian rule stretched across 4 terms, propped up by election fraud and brutal crackdowns. By 1960, rice prices had risen 60%, unemployment hit 23%, and crime flooded the streets. On April 26th, 500,000 protesters surrounded the presidential palace, forcing Rhee to resign. But the chaos didn't end. A year later, on May 16, 1961, General Park Chung-hee seized power in a military coup. To many, Park was both a beloved visionary and a feared dictator. Unlike his predecessors, he focused not on politics but on the economy. In 1961, standing before 20,000 students at Seoul National University, he declared, "For 5 years, we must tighten our belts. We must endure pain if we wish to survive. In 10 years, we will lead East Asia. In 20, we will become a world power. I will execute anyone who steals even a single dollar from the people. I am ready to die for this vision." Park began an all-out social reform. He purged corruption, executing 24 officials and businessmen, and imprisoning many others. Those who pledged loyalty and agreed to help rebuild the economy were released, forming the foundations of South Korea's corporate empires. To maintain control, he created a vast secret police network. Protests were crushed, the press censored. No Korean leader ever held such absolute authority nor inspired such fear. Lacking natural resources, Park turned to human capital. Education became a national priority. Students sent abroad were forced to return, or their families would be punished. The Simon-Andong New Village movement modernized the countryside, but erased much of Korea's traditional culture in the process. Industrialization began. Foreign companies investing in Korea were required to transfer part of their technology to local firms. This single policy birthed the chaebol, the massive family-run conglomerates that would dominate Korea's future. By the 1970s, Korea had over 60 chaebols. 5 giants, Samsung, Hyundai, SK, LG, and Lotte, controlled half of the stock market. Park directed them to focus on export-driven industries. He nationalized banks to control capital flow, offered low-interest loans, land, and tax breaks in exchange for strict government oversight. He pushed heavy industry, steel, petrochemicals, automobiles, shipbuilding, electronics. But Park's vision demanded sacrifice. Citizens were ordered to skip 1 meal each week, avoid foreign cigarettes, and stop drinking imported coffee. Even by the late 1970s, most Koreans still watched black and white TVs while color televisions were exported overseas. Luxury goods were restricted to prevent capital outflow. And yet, exports skyrocketed from $32 million in 1960 to over $10 billion by 1977. Through U.S. mediation, Park signed a controversial treaty with Japan, securing $800 million in loans and technology transfer despite public outrage over Japan's colonial past. America remained Korea's key ally. Its military and economic cooperation helped train Korean officers, engineers, and entrepreneurs. Korean companies learned from American firms and joined global trade networks. Park even sent troops to Vietnam, earning over $1 billion in U.S. aid and contracts in return. By the late 1970s, South Korea had built the Seoul-Busan Expressway, a symbol of its modernization. Completed in just 29 months, it consumed nearly a quarter of the national budget. When it opened in 1971, Korea had officially entered the modern age. In just 2 decades, Park Chung-hee had transformed a war-torn land into a booming export nation. The first 5-year plan achieved 8.3% growth, the next 11.4%. But on October 26, 1979, Park was assassinated. The nation plunged into turmoil once more. Economic growth stalled, inflation spiked, and productivity fell. Yet Korea recovered swiftly. Its people had learned how to rebuild from ruin. Between 1986 and 1988, GDP growth hit 12% per year, making it the fastest growing economy on Earth. By the 1990s, South Korea was recognized as a newly industrialized nation, and by 2011, its per capita income, $31,750, had surpassed the average of the European Union. As Korea's economy matured, the government loosened control and allowed free competition. But the chaebols had grown too powerful. By 2017, the 10 largest conglomerates contributed nearly half of the nation's GDP, leaving small businesses struggling to survive. Today, South Korea faces new challenges: an aging population, low birth rates, and an economy too dependent on a handful of corporate giants. But this time, its battle isn't against war or poverty, it's against the weight of its own success.